Welcome, everyone. My name is Jenny Parks, and I'm the Vice President of Policy and Research at the Midwestern Higher Education Compact, otherwise known as MHEC. Thank you for joining us again for this series of webinars entitled How States and Systems Can Support Practitioner Efforts to Strengthen Dual Enrollment. Today, we have our fourth webinar in this series. We are joined by Amy Williams and Diane Barker of NACEP, the National Alliance for Concurrent Enrollment Partnerships. Others who have helped us develop this series are the Community College Research Center, Complete College America, and Zinth Consulting. I wanted to go over a few housekeeping rules here. First of all, if you're going to ask a question, please use the Q&A part of this platform, not the chat. I'll be monitoring it, and at the end, there'll be a Q&A session. We'll make sure that all your questions get addressed. Second of all, we are recording this webinar, and it will be available soon afterwards on our YouTube channel and on our website. Another reminder that we will send out a survey when we email you the recording and any of the relevant materials. We will give you a quick survey, and we ask that you please complete that so that we know how we did today and so that we can do better in the future. So I think that is it. I will see you all at the end of the presentation. For right now, I'm going to turn it over to Amy Williams.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, depending on where you are. My name's Amy Williams. I'm the Executive Director at the National Alliance of Concurrent Enrollment Partnerships. And joining me today, I have my colleague, Diane Barker, who is our Director of State Engagement. And we're here to talk to you a bit about how states are looking at quality or entering the quality conversation. And the way that Diane and I are very much thinking about this these days is we know that in these programs, they live in this middle space. And that means everybody's responsible for quality, program quality, but who's truly accountable? And so we'll be unpacking some of these elements in terms of how states keep their eye on quality assurance as we go through our webinar today. And we'll also give you a sneak preview of some of the preliminary results that are coming out of a study that we're doing that's funded by the Gates Foundation on the same topic. Diane, next slide, please. For those who are not familiar with our organization, we generally go by NACEP because our acronym is composed of several words that make a mouthful, but we are the National Alliance of Concurrent Enrollment Partnerships. If you don't know us or don't know our work, we are the first and only national organization supporting programs, practitioners, and policy to advance quality dual and concurrent enrollment programs. So we do our work in programs, practitioners, and policy in a couple different ways. We support programs, and particularly program quality, through providing the only national framework of rigorous best practices and national program standards. We also further elevate programs that meet or exceed those standards through program accreditation. We are the only national program accreditor for dual and concurrent enrollment. We support practitioners, and that's really where our heart and our focus is in a lot of our work. So we work to support practitioners as well as the field at large as that singular source for national best practices, for convenings, for cultivating and curating a extensive resource center of field-focused publications that have value to the field. We also support research. We do support advocacy as well as professional development, which we are often most known for. And further, and very germane to today's conversation, we support policy by ensuring deep at the root of our policy work is ensuring that the voice of the practitioner is at the table for state and federal policy conversations. So we feel that as practitioners are the ones most often tasked with the implementation of new policy, that they should have a voice in the formation of that policy. And specifically, we're working in all 50 states to really advance that quality conversation in all 50 states. But we have a couple formal roles for how we do that. So we work across the nation to advance quality college courses for high school students, no matter where they are or who's teaching them. So we have an important role in a couple areas in state policy. First and foremost, we kind of fill the policy gap. So there is really in most states, there's well-developed policy on the K-12 side of the house, very well-developed policy on the post-secondary side side of the house, and then there's this spot in between where our programs live. So we work to provide guidance, support, technical assistance to fill those policy gaps. And I would say on the regional accreditor element, K-12 accreditation has pretty well-defined boundaries and expectations. Certainly post-secondary does as well. So we also fill that gap by giving the specific look and guidance in these unusual programs that live in that middle space. Another area where we work very intensively with states is to align policy and practice. And we've recently kind of started calling this vertical alignment. We want everybody boots on the ground that is doing this impactful work with students on it and faculty on a day-to-day basis to feel connected to the policy objectives and the overall objectives of the state for these programs. We also work in horizontal alignment to help states ensure that policy enables practice that is aligned across the state, so student experience can be fairly regularly and predictably understood across the state. We provide functional solutions and technical assistance for states that are grappling with some of the common challenges that we have in the field, particularly within their individual and unique state contexts. And we also provide external accountability in a variety of different ways, but primarily at the state level through our processes of accreditation. And now I get to hand things over to my colleague Diane, who will take us on a little journey from here, and then I'll be back.
Thanks, Amy. I appreciate it. So, just a little bit about Amy and myself and how we got to this space. We both worked in our previous positions in our system office and on the program level. Amy was in Wyoming, I'm in Georgia. And while we were in those positions, we were charged with, like most of you, ensuring enrollment numbers in the dual enrollment program. I don't know about you, but I was constantly asked, how many students do we have enrolled across the spectrum? However, as we began to really dive into this work, and it took us a minute, but as we really dove into this work, Amy and I realized both in our respective states that it wasn't just about numbers, it was about quality. What kind of experience were these high school students receiving at our institutions, and how could we do that better? Because after all, our students deserve nothing short of the best high quality dual enrollment experience we could possibly give them. So, my question to you, does your state have a vision for dual enrollment that includes quality? Now, don't just answer that quickly. I want you to really stop and think about it. Have you gotten the message, seen an email? Is there something in statute or a rule that gives program quality as a key element in your state's expectations from your dual enrollment programs, either on the secondary side or on the higher education side or in the community? Go ahead and answer. Feel free to answer in the Q&A. We'd love to hear from you. And if they don't have quality, why do you think that is? And if they do have a quality statement, then feel free to share that. We'd like to know in what ways you've gotten the message that quality is important or just as important as enrollment numbers. Like I said, Amy and I would love to hear from you, and Amy's going to monitor the Q&A section for me. So I'll go on right now, but for the most part, programs that function at the local level, with states providing anywhere from little guidance or professional development, all the way down the spectrum to expecting NACEP accreditation for those institutions that want to provide dual enrollment. We know, as Amy said earlier, that there is a 50-state difference in the approach and how it is. So let me take just a second to mention, while I'm on the subject of our NACEP standards and accreditation. And this is just kind of a quick overview of our quality framework. Now, keep in mind that these 6 buckets are best practices that NACEP has found through the years that equate to excellence in high quality institutional dual enrollment programs. Each bucket encompasses a set of expectations that must be proven and held accountable by the institutions who do receive this accreditation. So, it's really not a give me, it's an earn or work for it. But our students deserve nothing less. So, just to give you an idea, across the nation, there are 10 states that require, incentivize, or otherwise encourage NACEP accreditation for programs offering dual and concurrent enrollment. Six states have a statute or a system policy that is based on our quality standards, and 10 states have a statute or, again, policy that is based at least partially on our NACEP standards. Getting a little bit closer to home with the states that are represented today, 5 require incentivized NACEP accreditation, and 5 states are on partial agreement with our quality standards. So I'm going to go ahead and popcorn this back to Amy because she's going to take a little bit deeper dive into quality and what you can and what states can and should expect for quality programming. Amy?
Thanks, Diane. And we did have a couple shout outs for the state of Washington and Kansas that elevated areas of policy that are attentive to and, set that expectation for quality as well. So thank you for those of you that chimed in. Diane and I spend a lot of time talking about like the various tools and levers and areas where states have opportunities to kind of lean in a little more structurally on the quality conversation. Those things like guidance, practice, professional development, providing resource. Those are pretty critical areas to help support practitioners' boots on the ground, and again, lend themselves really well into that horizontal alignment piece to ensure that each program is kind of playing by the same set of rules, using the same elements and guidance so that that aligns a better student experience across the state when we look at it as a statewide initiative. So I'm
Sorry.
trying to think back to the, yes, thank you, Diane. I'm
Mhm.
thinking back to when we got our Gates grant. I think it was about this time last year, we had an opportunity to apply for funds for the Gates Foundation to unpack this question that's on your screen right now. And really, this has kind of been the fundamental piece that we've been working on. We talk about program quality, even in kind of teeing up this conversation today. We do a lot of discussion about program quality at that program level. But now we want to challenge, as we see these things move from more localized activities up to statewide initiatives. NACEP feels that there is a challenge out there to states to really lean in on their quality conversation and have a concrete role in expecting quality and assuring quality through these programs. And using some of those tools that Diane laid out is probably the most functional and useful way to get after it. But we're also discovering other unique practices, which has been really a fun kind of component of this work. So a lot of this work and this idea of what is the appropriate role of the state in program quality assurance comes back to a question that I used to ask when I was with the Montana System of Higher Education. I used to do a lot of work with other states, and I would ask them one pivotal question, particularly states that actually had funding, because our state did not. I would say, okay, well, tell me what you know about your program. And usually there would be things that would be shared and discussed. And then I would ask them and further challenge them to say, okay, tell me how you know that. Where is the data? Where is the policy? Where is the follow-up? Those kind of elements. And sometimes states really had a challenge answering actually both of those questions, but particularly the second one. So at the program level, that's actually fairly easy to do, right? If I come into a program and say, tell me what you know about your program and tell me how you know it, a lot of times the odds are that you're doing it. And so it absolutely happens. And so those kind of answers, when the answer is focused on things you can absolutely say happen in your program and the ways that you know that they do at the program level, the answer is very frequently, I know we do this because I do it, or we have a staff member that does it and I go along with that, or we track it this way. But when you ask a state the same question, what do you know about these programs? And then how do you know it? The answer starts to involve more of those I do that people, and it becomes more complex really quickly. I would also argue that that makes it even more important. The complexity is an area that we all need because of the work that we do, and statewide coordination and that horizontal alignment includes complexity. But also it's very important, to Diane's point about we got to bring out the best programs consolidated across the state that benefit students. So we feel that this question, what's the appropriate role of the state in program quality assurance, is a critical one, and the time has definitely come. And I think realistically, as someone who's been in this field for a while, and I know we've got folks on this webinar that have been in the field even longer than me, anyone who's been doing this work knows that these programs are really popular and they're growing. And this is a question that's probably been building over time to this level. the current situation that we're in with the growth of these programs is really different than it was 10 years ago, where these programs were seen as very small, localized niche activities. And in some parts of the country, they really still are. But we're seeing a lot of shift, and a lot of shift fast. So when programs are built and run at the local level, the responsibility for the structure or the function really falls to that program if it's a small localized activity. But what we've seen change is we've gone from a small niche-like activity to now states really leaning in statute on using these programs as kind of one of their fundamental approaches to how the state does education. Now, when programs are a local affair, the responsibility for quality is easily, I think, assigned at the local level, at the program level in this case. But when programs become an actual state initiative, there are state funds coming for it, there's new policy being developed. Who has that responsibility for program quality, and what is the role of the state? So like if the nation is moving to scale these opportunities at the state and system-wide level, and that work is in the hands of the state, then what should the state be doing to ensure that these programs that they're incentivizing, encouraging to grow, driving the expansion of, what is that state's role in ensuring the quality of these programs? And is it the same as what lives at the program level, or different? If different, how? So those are some of the questions we've been grappling with as we receive funds for this Gates to pursue this work. And today we're going to preview some findings from that work, just preliminary. You get the sneak peek, I think, even ahead of some of the people that were on our advisory committee. So you'll get a sneak peek of some of that work that we've got today. So through this work, we've been really having a lot of thoughtful conversations and asking a lot of questions. And this work is really supportive of and in parallel with a lot of our other state work that we do through a collective impact group called College and the High School Alliance, which you may have heard of. I know Alex Perry was on with John Fink a few weeks ago in this series. But really, we're trying to do this work in parallel, A, because it makes total sense, B, because it's important to do this work in a coordinated systematic and parallel way. So we're really looking at questions like, what are you, the state, trying to accomplish with these programs? What do you know about the structure and function of how they work in your state? And is that actually aligned with what you're trying to accomplish? If not, what needs to change? What are you going to do to measure and mark progress towards whatever this vision or goal is? And we've mentioned this a couple times. What is the typical student experience, and how aligned is that across all of the different programs that are in your states? And then, of course, that unpacks all sorts of fun questions we like to get into. Okay, well, what is your funding structure like? Is that supporting the vision or goal? Or is it setting up competitive environments which are distracting from that vision and goal? Those that have worked with, different states, or even done this work in different states, probably have come across some of these questions several times as they do that work. And so as we see these programs move from small, localized niche activities to statewide education initiatives, NACEP feels that states really need to lean in on ensuring and expecting and finding ways to monitor the quality. Next slide, please, Diane. So this is the landing place that we're at right now that we'll be sharing. We are still doing our graphics workup, which is part of this process. So you're stuck with what Amy Williams could figure out how to do with in PowerPoint. And so, but hopefully the title cues you in that we're talking about cornerstones of quality-focused policy, and specifically quality-focused state policy. We feel very strongly, after doing this work over a number of months, speaking to, I think, like 35 different states about this work, Diane, that states do have a very important role in this at that high level in the statutory. And that is, states need to define quality, what they expect. Define quality, they need to expect quality, they need to empower quality. And that's where a lot of the work gets done, and I'll unpack that in a moment. And further, back to that second part of the question I like to ask, they need to monitor quality. All of this work needs to happen within alignment, and really is fundamental to help the state meet some of those big picture objectives, move towards a specific state vision, do things like grow access and scale access, ensure alignment, which, by the way, alignment is not necessarily the same thing as identical. Anyone who's worked with NACEP and NACEP standards know that they are both solid enough to make a benchmarking goal as well as flexible enough to fit a variety of programs. When you look at our accredited programs, we have everything from small rural programs up to the largest dual and concurrent enrollment program in the nation. So we have flexible standards, and those are an important component of that. Let's see, Diane, let me have you move on to the next slide, and I'll cover a couple of these other additional pieces. So in addition to just having these foundational components, states can, as they pursue things like their equity objectives or access objectives or student outcomes-based objectives, in that monitoring quality component, states can pick and choose areas to build on top of these cornerstones and founding elements. But these 4 founding elements need to be there to create a stable base for any additional scaling, growth, additional objectives in terms of access or equity as well. So when we look at this quality focus policy, we really see that it adds to the state's vision, or I'm actually thinking about it as like kind of a ladder or a foundation that you build up towards reaching that North Star state vision. Again, we have not had graphic design yet. But when we look at these 4 quality cornerstones, you need to define, you need to expect, empower, and monitor. There are roles for all of these things in the state vision. You know, when you define quality, you're adding focus. When you expect quality, you're tying all of the work that happens to that quality program expectation. I mentioned that empowering quality is where a lot of this work goes or takes place, but empowering quality not just identifies an entity like a system office or a coordinating board or a task force, which we think ownership and decision rights are a critical component of this. But when you empower quality, that is work that enables the work towards the state vision. And it may be that element of ownership that I just touched on. It may allow for statewide coordination. It may attend to things like building capacity, building knowledge, developing resources, providing guidance, doing training. And importantly, incentives. You know, empowering quality will use all of those tools in different proportions depending on the state's context to try and move towards a more quality focused, vertically and horizontally aligned program structure. And then last but not least, monitoring quality, that 4th cornerstone, really adds an element of accountability to the state's vision and a place to go circle back and check in and make sure progress is being made. Next slide. All right. Ways that, and this is early times for us in kind of looking at these and how we're forming out the various arguments. We're in the outline and paper writing phase right now. But one of the ways that I have been kind of operationalizing this work in my head from my former state role is thinking about this as like a words matter. And this is giving this quality focus can help increase clarity at the program level, as well as task the state with setting clear and concise objectives for programs to meet while they do things like empower those programs through things like funding, incentive, coordination, training, things like that. So the way I've been thinking about it is if you look at these quality cornerstone pieces, they will help states shift from language like, well, you should offer dual or concurrent enrollment to that specificity of we need to offer quality dual or concurrent enrollment. Move from language like programs asking, like I did when I was at a program, well, what is the definition of quality, or whose definition of quality? Because there are a variety of different resources out there. By moving to increase clarity through this kind of work, the state actually sets that definition of quality, which adds that further element of clarity. Ensuring quality is a program, so a shift from ensuring that quality is a program level responsibility, which basically was my experience. Well, this is the expectation, programs can figure it out. And moving to a stance where the state is enabling quality and understands it's a state responsibility, and that the state's responsibility is truly to empower that good practice. It moves, when you challenge states to think this way, it moves from the set and forget mentality, especially when you're talking about monitoring, to a review and evaluate, mark against our goal, and see what progress we've made. So foreshadowing the report, which we hope to release in conjunction with our national conference this fall or shortly thereafter, There will be other additional elements to this as we work through kind of the outline and the paper writing that will really zero in and focus on using these cornerstones to build to scale and particularly to build to equity objectives as well. But that's the preview we are prepared to give you at this point in time, and I get to hand it back to Diane to close out before we do question answer. Oh, you're on mute, Diane.
I'm on mute. You would think after doing this a million times, I'd know to unmute. Thanks, Amy. I wanted to mention to you that NACEP does have a resource center, and it is on our website at nacep.org. If you look at the drop-down boxes, you will see it literally says resources. And this resource center is chock full of different resources that you can sort by type, by subject, by audience, etc. Now, let me say, some of these are actually most of these are behind a membership, which NACEP is, as Amy mentioned, membership supported, membership driven. So I have included the QR code here if you're interested in NACEP membership. However, there are articles and webinars behind this in this resource center that are open to the public. So feel free to go to the nacep.org resource center and kind of peruse around and see what's in there so that we can hopefully answer some of the questions that you guys may have or be a resource for you. Amy and I would also like to personally invite you to our upcoming national conference, October 27th through the 29th in Orlando, Florida. And our hotel is literally across the street from Disney, the Disney Center. So please, please, please think about it. Now, I will say, and this is just a hint, that we are over capacity in our hotel, in our conference hotel. So if you're interested in attending, please hurry and book the overflow hotel because our registrations are amazing. We were really, really way and above our expectations, which we're thrilled about. I also want to mention that we do have a host of very, very good insightful and thoughtful presenters this year. I think this is going to be one of the best conferences NACEP has ever had. So please consider attending the conference. We'd love to see you there. And if you do attend, please tap Amy or me on the shoulder. We'll be two of the crazy people running around. Tap us on the shoulder and say, hey, I was on the webinar with you and Amy in July, and let us know that who you are. We really appreciate it. So with that, what questions do you have for us? Go ahead and feel free to put them in the chat. We would love to hear from you in the chat or I guess in the Q&A section. We would love to take a few minutes to answer the questions that you've got.
Well, thank you both. We have so far not so much questions in the Q&A as we have some comments, and but they provide food for thought and probably some opportunities too. One was posted pretty early in the webinar and mentioned that the Kansas Board of Regents does not have a statement on quality of dual enrollment through the Challenge Act. It only encourages post-secondary collaboration with high schools. My guess is that you guys probably have some commentary to offer on that.
I'll kick it over to the Director of State Engagement.
Thank you, Amy. Actually, Kansas is not alone in this.
Right.
At all. It's probably more the majority than the minority. But you know, there's two ways to approach this. You know, one is on the program level and the other is on the state level. So NACEP has figured out the program level approach, which is our accreditation standards. And as Amy said, we're working to figure out the best way for states to approach this. And not only for states to approach this, but for those people who are boots on the ground that want to encourage their states to approach quality in their programming. So that's kind of what we're hoping to be able to provide for you to give to those legislatures and those Board of Regents, you know, something that says, hey, this is really what we need to look at and how we need to improve our programming, especially if the state is putting money behind it.
Right.
They want to do, yeah, they want to do what's best. As a taxpayer, I want, and as a parent, I want my student to have the best possible experience.
So,
Yeah.
absolutely. if folks are interested in learning about that, where and what types of resources would you have or events would help them?
Yeah, for tapping into kind of state policy elements and
Mhm.
kind of the typical levers. Yeah, because to Diane's point, it's fascinating when you do this work in states because they really are. States struggle with the same types of issues, but that
Mhm.
underlying context of who has the purse strings, who has the levers and the power structures
Yeah.
really does lead to, as Diane mentioned, kind of these layered pieces. And I think part of the work that we're doing is trying to challenge states to not just have it in this one little piece of guidance that maybe is out for their 2-year systems and this one piece of guidance that's there, and just pull at least a quality expectation into statute and a definition that allows them to empower actors that
Mhm.
can do the work at the system law office level or in the task force or work group levels, which we're finding. We have another paper that we're doing with CHSA that'll be out soon-ish, probably fall or December, that really talks about how states collaborate in this middle in between space, which is fascinating. So
Mhm.
yeah, to Diane's point, I mean, it's not shocking that we find like an expectation for quality in one piece and not comprehensively. And so that allows people to pick and choose. And that
Mhm.
creates program variability, and variable practice can lead to variable quality and variable student experience. So we're doing a lot of focusing on the student experience. I am getting to your question, Jenny. So if you want to be super tuned in to kind of things that are happening in states, Diane does a roundtable for state agencies, but that's really at that state agency level. At the practitioner level, Diane and I used to run, and now Diane coordinates with the Advocacy Commission on. We always do a half-day pre-conference workshop on new and emerging topics, new resources at our annual conference on the Sunday prior to the start of the regular conference program. That is a great place to tune in. Obviously, tune into, if you become a NACEP member, you get access to our members only listserv. We push a lot out through there. Obviously, getting on our mailing list by jumping on our website and joining is a great opportunity to stay tuned to this. But really, whatever we develop and put together is going to be in our resource center eventually. So if you're really, really busy like me and you only have time to check back on something 8 months later, that's where you're going to find it. Diane,
I'll
did I miss anything on
No,
ways
you
to stay
didn't.
tuned
Yeah.
in?
I
I'll
think you
also
covered them all. Yeah, and I did put up our QR code, our contact information. It actually leads to LinkedIn, so feel free to tag us.
Yeah, and
thank
that's a really
you.
good place to hang out and see what NACEP's thinking. Is very frequently Diane and I will post or
Mhm.
repost things that are that we have reviewed and feel are valuable for the field to tune in on.
Awesome. Well, I do know that MEC is working on developing a state policy workshop for next summer. So there will be more to come on that as the details evolve, but that would be a really great piece for a state team to sit down and noodle through at that
Mhm.
during that work time. So
Yeah.
everyone stay tuned for that.
Mhm.
Okay, we
Well,
have another comment, and I think it is referring to one of the earlier comments. So the first comment was, in the state of Washington, NACEP accreditation is required for all colleges programs, in-state, out-of-state, private, public, by 2027-28. And someone is asking, does that mean for dual enrollment offers, or are you talking about NACEP accreditation even for distance enrollment and education of an out-of-state institution accepting students from Washington?
That's
Do
a
they
great
need?
question.
Yeah.
I will not speak for Tim Stetter. Full disclosure, Tim is one of the former board presidents of NACEP. And as soon as they hired me, he jumped off his term. So I'll just leave that hanging out there in the air. Now, my understanding is that does not apply to out-of-state providers, but maybe Tim, if you're still with us, you can jump in and add that in the chat. But the focus has been really directly on the in-state institutions and getting them all moved towards that same kind of quality benchmark and metric, which obviously builds more state alignment around that student experience. And I've mentioned that many times today, but that is something that we're really deeply thinking about as we do this work. Is ultimately, we know students are the ultimate beneficiaries. So really it's a backwards planning to see where we go from there in terms of policy to build that alignment, that common practice, common language, common understanding. And I mean, like, full disclosure, I'm going to put NACEP's cards on the table here. If we can get all 50 states aligned on at least some areas, we will be in a much better situation as a nation in terms of how these programs look, feel, and what we can research about them, things like that.
Absolutely. As someone who works in this space just in the 12 MEC states, I can tell you the variability in definitions, data, where programs are housed, what they're called, it makes it really, really complex and actually kind of difficult to make an apples to apples comparison and really get a feel for what students are experiencing. So,
well, I mean, Diane knows this, but so Diane and I both come from the field. We worked at programs, moved up to the state levels to try and do some of the things that we talk about day to day here. But at a fundamental level, and I've been using this with a couple of presentations I've done lately, I do kind of start to think about this as, because I fly so much, Diane probably even flies more. If a student that participated in dual enrollment sits down next to me on a plane, there are things that I will ask them, and there are things that I will not ask them because I know not every state requires it, not every program does it.
right.
And I think that's a shame when we look at the multi-million dollars, or throw California in the pot, like more than $1 billion across this nation that is probably invested in state funds either overtly or through regular mechanisms like formula funding. So that's not acceptable. We can do better, and we need to do better, but it is bringing in the state and very clearly helping them understand, yes, you do have a role in this. It is not all on practitioners. And there's a way, part of me that just says you need to trickle down to the practitioner level, because you are challenging them to do things without enabling them with things like funding or the ability to staff at a capacity that helps them to do the work or provide guidance.
Absolutely. And that's a realistic scenario, Amy, because it did happen to one of our commissioners. She did sit on a plane and she was sitting next to, and you have that conversation of, what do you do? And she told them, and the student was like, well, I was a former dual enrollment student. I had a wonderful experience and I've taken that and grown, and now he has his own business. So, that was one of those that, oh, good, this is a great story. But it caused Amy and I to pause, because it was like, well, what if it wasn't a great story? How do we respond to that? What is our responsibility for that? And that also led to some of our questions that we had in getting this Gates grant. Okay, so what happens if we do talk to a student from a state who does not have the best experience? What's our responsibility and our role in that as adults in this space?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think that's an emerging theme we're starting to see, is the student experience. So like, you'll see our national conference is spotlighting the student experience. And that's not just because we picked a theme out of a hat. There are a couple of very, and not even strategic, common sense reasons. We are building these programs for the students. So talking about the student experience is a critical component of that. We've got, for our plenary, we have CESI, who I'm going to get their acronym wrong, but I'm going to try and do my best. The Center for Community College Student Experience Study. I got part of it right. Probably got like 4 of the 5 letters. But they do a community college experience study and have done for years, and they got funding to pilot a dual enrollment student experience survey on that. And so they're going to talk about year 2, because they're out of the first year pilot onto the second one. And so they're going to talk about what that student experience, what we can learn as programs and institutions about that student experience. So there has been kind of a build to this as well, I think, in this place. And I would be stunned if we don't see more focus on the end user in these programs, which, I mean, it's about time.
Yeah, agreed. To your point, here's a specific question about that. What about policy aimed at addressing transferability of dual and concurrent enrollment classes to 4-year institutions? I know there is a state-to-state variance, but anyway, out-of-state is there any way out-of-state transfers can have better alignment? Well, I will just say that's one of the things that is on MEC's list, at least to try to have those conversations among the Midwestern states. We're getting there, but it takes time. But NACEP, you have a national scope, so I'd love to hear what you're seeing and saying.
I will give anybody who fixes transfer in the United States $1,000 out of my own pocket, because I'm sorry, but it's like dual enrollment students are essentially in some ways transfer students. I know some states treat them differently and they can only call them in first-time freshmen, but they're coming in with credits, which is kind of like my definition of a transfer student, and probably credits from another institution. I guess that would be the second component. And so when we look at transfer and the issues with transfer in the US, dual enrollment students are a subset of that. They're just caught up in it, not by nature of the fact that they're taking these classes early. They're just getting sucked into the same vortex all the other students and get sucked into. I will drop, if I can find it really quickly, a link into the chat that gives us our best proxy of dual enrollment credit acceptance. There is a database that UConn maintains. It is for them, but they do it by combing through institutional policy, and they will cite the policy when they find it. So I find it incredibly useful in
Oh,
looking at
yes,
the dual
please.
enrollment transfer piece. But in terms of state to state transfer, one of the things, we will touch on that in this paper. One of the things that we've been really thinking about as we've done this are, I think we've called them like state ecosystem elements, Diane.
Correct.
Things like, are you a common course number system? Like, that's super helpful enabling conditions to make students give students the opportunity to maximize any credits that they have in state, because I know that the question is specific to like that interstate transfer element. So we will be attending to that, but I do think that this is packed up underneath the fundamental issue with transfer in the United States. But before I hand things over to Diane to make her comment, because I know she's got good thoughts on this as well, I find that transfer credit acceptance comes down to trust and transparency. And the more that we are using common language, common practice, aligned approaches, the more that the transparency and that trust can be built. So I don't see this as tasking states to lean in and have the quality conversation. I don't see that as detracting from the work to try and clean up transfer. I see that as only potentially additive, but I could be wrong. I'm like open to other opinions.
You're right, Amy. It's so spot on in the way you say it. Looking at transferability across the country, as we tend to do in this space that we work in, it's really interesting because I've seen systems that don't accept their own inner system courses transferred, which just blows my mind. It's like, how are you in the system and you all have the same operating procedures pretty much, and you don't accept your own transfers? Yet the opposite end is there are systems, there are states who have guaranteed agreements for transfer, especially when it comes to academics between 2-year and 4-year, which is the world that I come from, is the 2-year. So I would say, start locally and try and build from there. And as Amy said, it's really about trust. And, it's real interesting because sometimes those adjunct instructors who teach at the 4-year teach at the 2-year, and they still, it's the same course and they don't always transfer. So I would definitely say start on the local and then work your way out. But again, that's something that, as Amy said, we plan to touch on as much as we can in this new Gates paper that we're working on right now.
I'll add a piece from we have a concurrent enrollment advisory group that we pull together. And for those of you who are on there today, be looking for some invitations to those fall meetings. But one of the things that has come up, especially since HLC put forth new, I would say more relaxed language about instructor credentialing last year, is that we've got states doing very different things in response to that. And then we also have differences within states where we're just beginning to hear a few conversations of, well, if the community college doesn't only ask for instructors to have the master's plus 12 credits versus the master's plus 18, we won't take any of those credits that were taught there. So we're very, very concerned about that. And of course, that has implications across state lines as well. So that if any of you are interested out there, get in touch with me. We'll make sure that you're part of this group and these conversations, because that's just one little piece of why they might not accept a course. There are multiple others. So,
yeah.
All right.
I'm excited about Nate's question.
Yes.
Me too.
All right.
Me too.
We do have one. Another question, which part of the student experience do you see as the biggest issue? Enrolling, academic quality, or student support services?
My answer is yes.
I would say
Nate,
with the exception of academic quality, I have less concerns about that. Like if I'm
Mhm.
sitting next to a student on an airplane, my biggest concerns then and the areas that I said I won't talk about are tell me about your offboarding experience. Tell me how you were oriented. Tell me about your first advising appointment. Tell me how often the faculty mentor or faculty liaison, popped in on Zoom. How connected did you feel to the campus? Those are the parts and pieces that I very much am concerned about. The academic quality thing to me seems like at any college that is offering their credits on any course, they should be laser focused on the quality of that course offering, as well as the surrounding elements of the authenticity of a rigorous college experience in that high school setting. So that one worries me a little less because the other things are the kind of added on are sometimes seen by programs as the added on elements. And I think that they are essential. I know that as we move from a dual enrollment has a very long history, and spoiler alert, most of its history was that these were for college bound students already that were probably pretty likely to go to college and be successful. And then, this was filling time for them in their senior year. Flip that to now, and we are seeing this propagate across the nation as an equity strategy with which the research supports that this can
Right.
have a profound impact on students as well. Diane, just so you know, you're still sharing your screen.
Okay, I'm gonna stop
So
sharing.
as we look at these things propagate from an equity standpoint and move from students that have a background with college or families that went to college and that can support some of the other conversations that happen around the college going experience to students that might be first time to college, maybe don't come from a background that have that, maybe don't have access to that kind of, personal support area, that makes these elements of support, advising, transition planning, it makes them all the more important. And really fundamentally, colleges have recognized that. That's why these exist on campuses and live in that space. And the challenge of concurrent enrollment has always been it's not just standing up one course in a high school, it is standing up a portion of a college in a high school setting
Yes.
with fidelity, with rigor, with that continuity and building those bridges and connections to higher ed for students. And so I think that's the kind of place that we're in with this challenging states to really think thoughtfully about the student experience. Does every student get advising? Do they all get transition planning? Do they feel connected to the campus? Do they know anyone that's on the campus? Those kind of things. And I know some of these are harder objectives to hit with than others in different states, but that's why states can have this flexibility of how they do the work by empowering the right entities to work to the goals and objectives they identified.
Well
Thank
said,
you.
Amy. And I'd like to add too, institutions get, just like the rest of us, you get only a few minutes to make a good first impression. And so as institutions, reach out to these students, to me, the student experience starts even before the student comes through the front door. What are their experiences? Who's reaching out? What are the messaging that they receive even before they come through that door? Because that is part of the student experience. And you want that to be as positive and enlightening and engaging as possible. So as Amy said, your orientations, your messaging, your outreach, are you in the schools? Are you visible in the community? That to me is huge. When I worked at the institution, I would wear my T-shirt, my college T-shirt on the weekends at the grocery store, so people could ask me about it and I could tell them about it. So it starts even before that student walks through the front door. And then what are those front door barriers that the students have? Look at your again. Amy and I preach partnership and data. Look at your data. What are those students that are in your service delivery area? Who are they? Are you reaching them? Are you looking at are you talking to their parents? Because in many cultures, the seniors and the parents and the leaders are the people who determine if a student is going to continue to take classes, go to college, which college, etc. So it happens before the front door. And then once a student is in the front door, how are you greeting them? What experiences are they having in terms of their registration? Is there someone helping them? Is there someone holding their hand? Are there support services for students with disabilities? All those things are so, so key. I'm like Amy, academic quality, probably as important as it is, takes a back seat. Not to say that it's not important. It's just you got to get them to that point. That's
It's
like the
and it's
last
easier,
piece. It
right?
is easier. It is easier because those standards are pretty much already set. And so, by the institutions. You got to get them to that point, and then you have to keep them there to make and give them services to make sure that they're successful in those programs. As I said in the beginning, Amy and I used to be charged with enrollment when later on we realized quality also means outcome. And are those students being successful, and what does that look like for those students?
Yeah, I used to
Excellent.
challenge like our faculty and administration the same way Diane did. Like, look, for all intents and purposes, this course is the student's first touch with for a lot of students with higher ed. What kind of impression do you want to leave them with? And it is an opportunity for IHEs or institutions of higher ed to really build a program that not just supports students, provides them, some information about how academically prepared they are, what the
Hmm.
options out there, but really institutions have an opportunity to build a bridge and kind of the ball's in their court to do that.
Hmm.
You have early access to college capable high school students. What are you going to do with it?
Right.
The same students you want to enroll the
Yeah,
following August.
the same ones
Yes.
that you're doing a pizza party in the cafeteria for, except you have like intensive academically focused time with them. So can your
Right.
faculty pop in and showcase how cool they are?
Hmm.
Just saying.
Again, yeah, that first impression.
Well,
Got one shot at it.
That's great. Thank you. All right, we have another question. Do you have concerns about virtual or asynchronous offerings in this space in offering quality efforts?
Diane, do you want to do it?
I was giving to you.
I think in some ways yes, in some ways no. The thing that I always ask about this, because I do believe that there is a place for asynchronous and online learning. I mean, like we all went through the fact that you can teach online and with integrity and quality and experience as well. So we experienced that element. I think the key thing that I tend to ask when I am engaged by, let's say, online providers or online asynchronous, the key question I ask is, okay, well, tell me about the partnership with the high school. What are you guys talking about? What does your MOU look like? How much do you know about the student population they're trying to serve and what their objectives are? And again, back to Diane's point on the last question, we like to geek out on data and
Mhm.
partnership. Partnership is squishy. Data can be nice and chiseled and hard. And that's a good compliment, I think. And so, really, I start to dig in on why are you using it? What is the challenge that this helps you overcome? Like, what is the problem you're trying to solve with this? And then look at the partnership elements. Okay, well, how does your partnership align to what you're trying to solve? And is it supportive, or is this just a thing that you're adding? And very frequently, I'll come across that programs that add this because they have a problem with an instructor. They can't find a qualified instructor. We've lived that experience. We know that that is a legit challenge for everyone out there. So if you're going to replace that with synchronous or asynchronous online, then tell me about the partnership and how it works within there. How often are you touching base?
Mhm.
Is this an a la carte menu offering, or is this truly a partnership where you're collaborating to meet objectives, analyzing and seeing whether those objectives were met
Yeah.
or progress was made?
It fits in the greater
Yeah.
strategy and the
Mhm.
reason that you are doing this, right?
Exactly, exactly. And there's a student element in that if the student is taking online or asynchronous courses, to make sure that those services are still being provided for those students. They must be treated the same as the students who are on campus, either traditional or dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment. Those students should have access to the same types of tutoring, library, ID cards, whatever services that you provide for those students on campus must be the same as those students who are virtual and asynchronous.
Yes, that sounds a lot like what we talk about in another portion of MEC's work with the state authorization reciprocity agreement and
Mhm.
all of the standards for online education. It needs to be just as robust and supportive in a concurrent enrollment setting as it is in every other aspect. So,
Mhm.
all right. Well, I think that is it for our questions. We did have Tim Stetter come on and say This is accreditation just for concurrent enrollment as defined by NACEP, high school teachers teaching college courses in high school classrooms. This is known as College in the High School in Washington State. So again, terminology, another area that it would be fun to clean up at some point. All right, well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you everyone who's logged in. Mary has shared with you a link. If you would like to join in and access the conversations we have in the Midwest about concurrent enrollment, please use the link she has provided. Thank you both so much. This has been wonderful. All of the materials and the recordings will be available on our website soon, and you will also receive an email and follow up. Please complete the little poll that the little survey that we give you so that we know how we're doing. And this has been great. Oh, and don't forget to tune into our next. We have one more webinar in this series. So thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thanks for the
Thanks
invitation. I
all.
appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.